Welcome to Beer Untapped with Perry Miller, the podcast. I'm joined by Seth.
Hey, welcome, guys. Thanks for finding us on the internet.
Now, these shows originally aired on Brookings Radio, but now they're all here for your enjoyment. I hope you like it.
There you go. Sit back, enjoy the show, relax. Let us know if you want to see anything on future shows. As we said, this comes out live in the Brookings area, but enjoy this archive episode.
Beer Untapped with Perry Miller. Welcome to Beer Untapped with Perry Miller. For much of the history of the craft beer movement, it's a category of beer that didn't get a lot of love. Most brewers made one, maybe two, just to cover their bases. However, that is changing, and many craft brewers are now embracing them. The lager, this week on Beer Untapped. A version of the lager is still far and away the most popular beer style in the world, but that Americanized version of a German Pilsner is light on flavor and designed to appeal to the masses.
You gotta love the lagers. You could, in the liquor store, draw a line down the center of the floor and say all the ales get on one side and all the lagers get on the other, and you would be correct, and those are two really big categories, but that's really where they start. Many times...
And still in craft beer, there'd be way more ales than lagers.
Right. And many times craft brewers only make ales. You know, if people think the difference between a craft beer and what they, beers that you would see during the Super Bowl...
Those are all lagers. Your Buds,
those
your
are
Millers,
those
your
are
Coors,
all lagers.
All
and
lagers.
And to be fair, they're one specific style of the lager family.
That's Seth Cook from Woodlegs Brewing in Brookings. Those mass-produced beers he mentioned are called American adjunct lagers. Adjunct because they have ingredients not found in the German ancestors of those beers, corn or rice, the most common adjuncts in America. Now we should back up a bit and explain there's a very basic difference between a lager and an ale. It's all about the yeast.
Lagers and ales are really defined by their yeast. You could put the exact same thing in two different beers, but only separate it between an ale and a lager yeast and have two completely different beers. Now, when people go to ask for a lager, what they're usually asking for, the traits that a lager is, it's usually a much cleaner and cooler and more complete fermentation. So some of the really strong ale smells, the aromas, the really strong beer smells, I know that's so ambiguous, the beer smell, comes from ale yeast, and they're known for that. There's fruits, there's parts of the fermentation are actually even sometimes butter or acids or other things. I know those sound unappealing, but in the ales they're more present, and they're usually at lower volumes.
Lagers don't have to be fizzy yellow beer.
When you talk about lagers, you're talking about a much more clean and less present aroma contributed by the ale yeast. It's usually a lot clearer. It's usually a lot more crisp. That doesn't mean it has to be pale. You can make lagers that are amber and even dark lagers. It's really about the yeast itself and how it's stored and conditioned.
The yeast isn't making a lot of flavor.
Right. Not nearly as much as its ale cousins would.
And there can be some.
It can be some. That's true, but it's not nearly as much.
Lager yeast, a different beastie from ale yeast, as it likes to do its work in cooler temperatures, the parts of Northern Europe where the great lager styles were developed.
Brewers of the day didn't understand the microbiology of it, but what the Germans would do is they would take their beers and they would lager them or cellar them or put them away in caves to be drank later, and this created an environment for the natural selection of yeast that did well at that temperature. And of course they had no idea that what they were doing is conditioning this yeast and really developing this yeast and selecting this yeast through natural selection to be more tolerant of the colder temperature.
Lagers are quite diverse. There are a number of different styles. Seth runs down a few of the more common.
Like the Helles is a pale. The Dunkel means dark. Of course, you guys know the Pilsners. Those are usually more heavily hopped. Of course, that's traditionally heavily hopped, not to the standards that we have built today. But Pilsner is more heavily hopped. And then you can get into the Bocks and the Marzens. Those are the darker ones. The Marzen is, the Oktoberfest style. And then what we actually just brewed is our Schwarzbier, which is a black lager. It's black as a night, looks like a stout, but tastes like a lager. It's usually a crowd favorite here, so we're going to get that fermented out.
More on lagers when Beer Untapped continues.
2 pints of lager and a packet of crisp, please. 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisp, please. I'll have 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisp, please.
Welcome back to Beer Untapped with Perry Miller as we talk lagers. They're more than fizzy yellow American beer. For a long time, it wasn't easy to find a lager made by a craft brewery, but that has been changing a lot of late. Seth Cook at Wooden Leg says they like to find the time to brew a lager or two as well.
And brewers kind of have a love-hate relationship with the lagers because we like them from a technical standpoint. In some cases, they're more difficult to make in terms of what we use and how you manipulate the yeast and how you take care of them. But just from a logistical standpoint, they tie up tank space longer. But we genuinely love them, and it's the guilty pleasure of the brewer to try to go make some lagers because we like to do it. The accounting side of us wants to make ales because they turn faster and stuff. But the lagers are usually made when we have a little bit extra time. We've had about a week worth of time here where the brewery wasn't absolutely pushed to the gills, so we've snuck a couple lagers in for the next couple months to come out.
Also, many lagers are filtered.
Because of how the yeast works, the yeast doesn't like to stick together and float to the bottom of the tank anymore. You have to kind of encourage it to come out, whereas ale yeast is pretty receptive to temperature. Once you make an ale cold after fermentation, it'll flocculate together. I know that's a really nerdy term. Flocculate like a duck.
It's a great word, though.
Like a duck. They'll flock together and rest at the bottom of the tank. Where the lagers are naturally kind of a colder fermentation anyway, they don't flock as well. So sometimes you have to use filter aids, and sometimes you have to actually pull the yeast out. So most of the lager beers are filtered.
And don't be fooled, just because it's light in color and clear doesn't necessarily mean it's low in alcohol content.
Don't ever associate the darkness or ABV of a beer just because it's a lager. Just because it's dark doesn't mean it has a high ABV. Just because it's a lager doesn't mean it has a low ABV.
Because your Schwarz beer is as dark as can be. It's what, 5%?
Yeah, I guess I always say this to make a point when you look at the style of beers and don't judge too quickly. If you look at a really clear, pale lager that's a very high strength, you're probably holding a 40 in your hand and it's malt liquor. So, just because a beer is pale doesn't mean it doesn't have strength.
And craft beer brewers, because they are what they are, and they're Americans, they'll make imperial lagers now that can be 8, 9, 10%, and they're clear as day.
Yeah, and then there's some imperials and double pilsners that are fantastic as well. So, lager's a great adventure.
A well-crafted lager can be full of flavor and a thing of beauty. Here's some to try that are easy to find and are quite good. Sam Adams Boston Lager, Shell's Pils, Zipline Copper Alt, Iyengar Celebrator Doppelbock, Wooden Legs Black Hills Schwarzbier, and nearly any of the many Oktoberfests that are out there. Give them a shot. One final note, another home game for the Jacks on Saturday. That means more fan cakes Saturday morning at Wooden Legs.
Free blue and gold pancakes, 8 o'clock in the morning on game day. The cool thing about pancakes, besides the fact that it's free food for donation, is that all of your donation money gets turned over to a local charity. This week, all the money is going to go to the local United Way, and they're going to help us with it. So come out, enjoy the Jackrabbit fans. We're going to have banter and fun, banter and batter.
That's it for this week's show. Until next time, drink local and drink responsibly. Thank you for listening to this archived edition of Beer Untapped with Perry Miller. Feel free to listen to other episodes, and if there's anything you'd like us to talk about on a future show, please let us know. Thanks again.